Ota Benga's story is one of profound tragedy and injustice, illustrating the depths of racial exploitation during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. His life was short and a proof of the colonial violence, racism, and dehumanization inflicted on African peoples during this era. Before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Ota Benga was born in 1883 in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. His tribe, known as the Batwa, was a small tribe known for their small stature and for being forest dwellers in Central Africa. For most of his early life, Ota Benga lived peacefully in the forests, deeply connected to his land, culture, and family. The Batwa were traditionally hunter-gatherers, relying on the rich ecosystems of the Congo Basin for daily needs and resources. However, during the late 19th century, Congo was brutally colonized by King Leopold II of Belgium. Leopold's Congo Free State was essentially his private property, and he used it for the mass extraction of rubber, ivory, and other natural resources, enforcing his rule with unimaginable cruelty. The native populations suffered under the brutal reign of the Force Publique, a paramilitary force that terrorized the people with murder, mutilation, and enslavement. Ota Benga's village was caught in the crossfire of these violent encounters. Ota Benga's wife and 2 children were murdered by Belgian forces, and he himself was captured by African slave traders allied with European colonizers. His entire world, which had once been one of close community and harmony with nature, was shattered. This marked the beginning of a series of tragic events that would lead to his eventual appearance in the United States. In 1904, an American businessman and explorer named Samuel Phillips Verner traveled to Africa to collect African individuals to be displayed in human exhibits at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, a common practice at the time. Human zoos were shockingly common during this period, where indigenous peoples from Africa, Asia, and the Americas were often put on display as living specimens, supposedly demonstrating primitive cultures in contrast to European civilization. Verner purchased Ota Benga from his captors along with other African individuals and transported them to the United States. Ota Benga, along with several other Africans, was exhibited at the World's Fair in St. Louis. The purpose of the exhibit was to display the superiority of Western civilization by presenting people from other cultures, particularly African, as savages or primitives. Ota Benga was shown alongside other Africans, Native Americans, and Filipinos, all of whom were expected to perform their traditional ways of life for gawking American and European audiences. They were housed in mock villages, and their daily routines, clothing, and mannerisms were subject to intense scrutiny and ridicule. Benga was about 4 feet 11 inches tall. His sharpened teeth, a tradition in some Central African cultures, were often points of particular fascination and objectification. The press and public saw him as an oddity, referring to him as a savage or pygmy, a term that reduced him to his physical characteristics rather than recognizing him as a human being with dignity, agency, and a rich cultural heritage. After the World's Fair ended, Verner brought Ota Benga back to Africa, but Benga's return to his homeland was brief. With his family gone and his community destroyed, Ota Benga felt disconnected from his former life. He returned to the United States with Verner in 1906, where his life took an even darker turn. Verner was unable to continue caring for him, and soon Ota Benga was handed over to the New York Zoological Society, which ran the Bronx Zoo. In one of the most shameful displays of dehumanization, Ota Benga was placed in the zoo's monkey house, where he was exhibited alongside an orangutan named Dohong. His exhibit was designed to present him as part of the animal kingdom, further reinforcing the racist pseudoscientific theories of the time, which claimed that Africans and other non-European races were less evolved and closer to animals. Thousands of visitors flocked to the Bronx Zoo to see Ota Benga, many treating him as nothing more than a curiosity or spectacle. At times, Benga would be forced to carry around a bow and arrows, and zoo visitors would taunt him, laugh at him, and even chase him around the zoo. Although he was occasionally allowed to roam the zoo grounds, he was continuously treated as an inferior being, not as a man. The exhibit of Ota Benga in the zoo led to protests from some African American leaders, including the African American clergy. The Reverend James Gordon, a prominent black minister, was particularly vocal in denouncing the zoo's treatment of Benga. Gordon argued that this was a profound violation of human dignity, highlighting the rampant racism and exploitation embedded in American society. Under pressure from these activists, the Bronx Zoo eventually removed Ota Benga from public display. After being removed from the zoo, Ota Benga was placed in the care of Reverend Gordon and his orphanage. Despite the efforts to help him adjust, Ota Benga found it difficult to assimilate into American society. His life in New York was far from easy. Although he was no longer a public spectacle, he continued to be treated as an outsider and an oddity. He attempted to adjust, learning English and taking up odd jobs, but his isolation, homesickness, and the traumatic memories of his past haunted him. In 1910, Gordon arranged for Ota Benga to be moved to Lynchburg, Virginia, where he lived at the Virginia Theological Seminary and College. There, he was cared for by the black community and tried to make a life for himself, working in a tobacco factory and attending church. However, his pain and alienation only deepened. He longed to return to his homeland, the Congo, but the political and logistical challenges of such a return made it impossible. Ota Benga's life ended in tragedy. After enduring years of profound loss, exploitation, and loneliness, he became increasingly depressed. The promise of ever returning home to Africa grew dimmer, and he felt deeply out of place in America. On March 20th, 1916, at the age of 32, Ota Benga died by suicide. He shot himself in the heart with a pistol, unable to bear the weight of his sorrow any longer. While his name is not as widely known as it should be, Ota Benga's story remains a powerful testament to the need for historical reckoning and recognition of the human dignity denied to so many. Today, he is remembered as a symbol of resistance to the forces that sought to strip away his humanity, and his story continues to resonate in discussions about race, human rights, and colonialism's dark legacy.